Beyond the reactions of the camps and the independent observers, ladies and gentlemen, it's also important to put into play the reactions of the citizens across the social media spaces 24 hours post the by-election that was held on the 27th of November this year. This is important because prior to these elections and the actual participants in these elections went beyond the political camps and the independent observers and was affecting really the people directly. So in this episode of the People's Mirror, we want to bring to you the reactions that have emanated these 24 hours post the results of the by-elections being made public. But before we do that, if you are joining the People's Mirror for the first time, you'd notice that we are fairly a very small channel. And we also thank our subscribers who in the past 2 days have skyrocketed our subscription beyond 200 in just a period of less than 48 hours. So if you're joining the People's Mirror for the first time, please just hit the subscribe button to help us achieve our target of hitting 1,000 subscribers before the week ends. We still believe it's possible. Now, let us take a look at the stories that have come through the social media spaces to the tables of the People's Mirror right now on the reactions of the people post these by-elections that were completed on the 27th. But other than that, there is also need within this very episode to put into play this one area that we covered massively during the by-elections, being the Baringo North constituency. We want to put an overlay of what has happened, what has been the reaction of the people, what has been the reaction of the camp as we put an end to the trail of by-elections in that area. So stay with us to the end as we digest those two major stories for you. Let's start with the reactions of the people. Earlier on today, we did camp reactions where the members of the United Democratic Alliance were celebrating, among other people, Honorable Mudavadi for the win in Malava constituency. But is this really what the people are feeling? In some engagements that have happened across the day, you'd notice that specifically within Malava constituency and entirely the Luya community that were looking at Malava's by-election as a determinant ahead of 2027, there is still rather a division of reaction. There is a section of individuals who feel now that Ruto has actually implemented that area, and so come 2027, that area being Malava and the entire western area is likely to vote President Ruto because the strategies that were used for Ndakwa will still be applicable come 2027. But then there's another group of lawyers reaction online that now feel that the amount of money that was used in this by-election by the government camp might not be there to be used across all parts of the nation in 2027. And so whereas this particular outplay of the by-elections came out as proving that there is strong influence of the United Democratic Alliance in the grassroots area, this section of lawyers online feel that this particular thing might not sustain itself up to 2027 owing to the nature of the highest number of elections that will be carried out that time and the resources that are limited government-wise. So they feel that on a level playing field, when the government is not only focusing on Baringo North or in Malava or in Banisa or just less than 6 constituencies, on a level field where the government is now focusing on 290 plus constituencies, then the investment that was done in Malava might not be done across, and so then is when the real results would play out. This particular cohort also believes that the celebration of individuals like Honorable Mudavadi is actually misplaced because they feel that the win in Malava went to the government as a result of the use of government resources and not as a result of the dominance of Honorable Mudavadi in this area. Now, you see this, if you counter it with what happened in the actual ground, where Honorable Mudavadi's dominance is now being seen as the main cause of the win in Malava, and the reaction of the people. Then the reaction of the people might also be the actual mirror of why Ford Kenya's candidate that belongs, the party that belongs to the current Speaker of the National Assembly, lost a ward seat in the backyard in Kabuchai. So whereas the people of Malava might have voted in pattern to have Honorable Ndakwa in, section of lawyers feel like the Ndakwa's election was not fair because one, government resources were deployed in favor of Ndakwa, which might not be there in 2027, and number two, because the other camp, being the United Opposition, was not given an adequate time and political space to advance their cause, and as a result, so they look beyond the election in Malava from the reports that are coming online, and they are saying that the win should not now be attributed to Musalia Mudavadi the way we attributed it to Musalia Mudavadi in our previous episode, and should be attributed to the resources that the government spent in that area. Now, there's also another interesting division still just in Luhyaland and Malava, because we are putting a focus on Luhyaland because beyond the Mountain Kenya region, another area that will have an impactful effect on the 2027 elections is of course the Luhya nation, and so their unity or disunity ahead of this election, or where they put their horses ahead of this election, really matters. So there is a concern of another individual called Natembeya. Natembeya George is currently the governor of Trans Nzoia County, and during this particular by-elections his influence was very prominent. He single-handedly steered the campaigns that were witnessed for the DAP Kenya candidate in Malava, and also for the other by-election that was in Chwele ward in Kabuchai in Bungoma as part of the Luhya area, and mobilizing his team as part of the Trans Nzoia team to penetrate the counties of Bungoma and Malava, even in the heat of resentment and political alignments that were put in place to stop him, shows his rise, and his statements were kinda triggered to actually do away with the old Luhya guard. So he has come out as one of the individuals that the current existing Luhya power really fears ahead of 2027, or rather is a main concern within their conversation, even if they don't fear him ahead of 2027. And this plays out that on the day that the elections were actually being held, allegations now have arrived that plainclothes police actually curtailed the movements of Honorable Natembeya, leading to the success of Honorable Ndakwa. So this gentleman is coming out in the lips of most Luhya individuals as one individual that has the opportunity of now uniting the Luhyas together and fronting one image for the Luhya nation in 2027 and beyond. They're now likening him to Joshua of the Bible, saying that while Moses died on the mountain, in the mountain, while taking the Israelites to Canaan, Joshua had the mandate to finish the journey by the blessings of the Lord. And now they're comparing Natembeya to the Joshua who will take the western part of Kenya to their promised land, with certain Luhyas now saying they should dissociate themselves completely from the ODM party and consolidate a Luhya unity that will front a new unification for the western part of Kenya in 2027 and beyond. While still on the same Luhya unity, Bandas are now attacking also Honorable Edwin Sifuna, who certain members of the ODM party are seeing as an individual that did not deliver the simplest of tests, being the Kariobangi'S North ward contest within the Nairobi County, where he's the Secretary General, yet all other parts in the nation were actually delivered to the ODM party. This has been taken by two camps, one camp feeling that perhaps this was an internal play to sabotage the party internally, now that Honorable Sifuna has been quoted a number of times having a division from the rest of the other members of the party that joins the broad-based government. But others have also seen this as an investment by the members of the ODM party who are in the broad-based government to have now an opportunity to tarnish and finish Sifuna that they did not have previously. So the Kariobangi North ward being within the Nairobi County, where Sifuna is the senator and is also the Secretary General of the ODM party, is an eyesore to the party that they lost it under the watchship of Sifuna. One thing that's also very interesting is that Sifuna did not go to campaign in these other areas, including Kasipul, while Honorable Gladys Wanga was there, and he did not go to these other areas to put his focus on this part being the Kariobangi North ward. So this particular area being lost to the ODM, while ODM secured all other places except Narok Township ward where they were contesting, is an eyesore to the SG and to his position also in ODM. So other members are calling for his exit. We detailed an episode prior to the by-election on what actually happened in Kariobangi North, where there was a lady that Sifuna had asked whether or not she could say the full names of the senator, and it turned out that the lady did not know. And in our commentary, we said that this just depicted how leaders did not have ground touch with their actual supporters. So the blames that are coming out of or inside the ODM party right now, that is putting Sifuna in the limelight as an individual that did not deliver and as an individual that now should see the door, are actually, well placed. If Sifuna does not have touch with the city and cannot deliver a small seat as an MCA to the party, then the position of the Secretary General has failed the ODM party. But other warnings have been given previously, including by the governor of Siaya County, that ousting Sifuna from that particular position will sabotage the ODM party. So as the ODM party is still trying to actually survive post the death of Raila Odinga, making certain drastic decisions would be very detrimental to that party. And so calling on Sifuna to deliver on other areas would be the best call, while giving him room within the party other than ousting him. Now, that's also part of the Luhya unity. If Natembeya is now the new Joshua, and if the Luhyas are going to speak the same voice, where Boni Khalwale, Honorable Natembeya, Cleophas Malala, and the likes that are supporting that cause can come together to rally and dissociate from other parties, including the ODM party, and form strongly behind the DAB Kenya party, then they will have an opportunity in the national seat, considering that Luhya is the second most populous tribe in Kenya, that if they decide to vote alongside the tribal blocks, which has been the history of Kenyan political voting, then they have a chance to negotiate power. Now, beyond that, there is also talk of 2027, and we captured this briefly on our previous episode on whether this was an actual window, and people are divided online. Actual voters are divided, saying that they, just as we hinted, this amount of money will not be used in 2027, and so 2027 might not be a ground for the United Democratic Alliance. Of course, it goes back again to resources and to the police involvement of security and intimidation, and Kenyans online are still feeling that beyond the elections that we witnessed on 24th, this might not be the current exact window of how 2027 will play. Now, beyond that, ladies and gentlemen, let us look at the one constituency that we spent a lot of time taking a look at, because it was a battle of two deputy presidents. As we're putting a stop and finish to all these by-election episodes, it's only important that we do this overlay on Baringo North. Now, people are looking at it differently. From Rigathi Gachagua's end and reaction, the loss in this particular by-election was not a loss, but rather a solid, strong start. And so he takes this as the real political test ahead of 2027. He defiantly celebrates his loss as a demonstration of growth. And so he says, for a DCP, a small party, to have penetrated coast and become number 2 in a constituency seat, penetrated Nairobi and took an MCA backward position, that unpenetrated Narok, which is in the Ma community, and delivered an MCA seat, then this should not be taken as a setback, but should be taken as growth ahead of 2027. And he also says that for the united opposition to actually have divided Mbeere North into halves, even after all those government involvement in that area directly, this should be seen as a step ahead of 2027. But these comments first generally before we narrow down to Mbeere North, as the opposition are rushing back to their drawing board, and as Ruto informs electrified crowds about his success strategy and how he intends to come back when time is fit, and campaign, because he says right now he's working. It is important to remember that this was the first real political test after the government witnessed a rift internally post the Gen Z's demonstrations of 2024 and 2025. And so its outcome was very, very important. One, for the united opposition to show that they are actually a rising force, and for the United Democratic Alliance, which is the ruling party in the broad-based arrangement, their vulnerabilities and weaknesses would be or would have been exposed by this particular by-election. So it was important for both camps, but for the ruling party it was more important to show that there was no vulnerabilities within the systems of government, because existence of any such vulnerabilities would have opened a huge Pandora's box politically between now and 2027. So how they look at it might be different, because the way Kindiki looks at it, Kindiki first held 17 rallies in a period of 10 days. He arrived on November 17th in Mbeere North, and he did 17 rallies, and he held 50 strategic meetings in just under 10 days. And so after landing in Mbeere North and sworn to the camp, and sworn to establish a camp until 2028, while only living with Wamudende in his hand, he did that. And so right now, the region which witnessed a 61% voter turnout, across all these other regions, there was no over 60% voter turnout. But this particular constituency witnessed 61% voter turnout, which is actually the highest in history of Kenyan by-elections. So they turned out, and it gave now Kindiki an opportunity to establish that he's actually the king of the mountain region, which was what he wanted to prove Rigathi Gachagua not being. So for them, they look at it as a win from not only Mbeere North region, but entirely within the mountain area, ousting the influence of Rigathi Gachagua. But from Rigathi Gachagua's camp, he looks at this as a growth opportunity moving into 2027 to now set their teams categorically ahead of that. In the eyes of Kenyans, it looks like the party that has been announced has won, because in politics, the person that has been announced is always the person that takes the public approval immediately. So even if you battle it within court processes, it takes time to regain that particular approval. And so in the eyes of people, it looks like the united opposition lost this one, and the broad-based arrangement gained this one. But is this the mirror into 2027? That is what the now Mbeere North will be a determinant of. And looking at it clearly, ladies and gentlemen, the setback that was created by that particular by-election has hit negatively the unity of the united opposition. Now requires them to actually go back to the drawing board and come up with better arrangement ahead of 2027. They have been morphed into a cohort of individuals that have promised Kenyans a change, and right now they are being mocked by the government camp as a team that is agendaless. So we are closing these episodes of by-election with Mbeere North's turnout. That was 61%, and the division that turnout has since caused between the government and the united opposition. But something remains steady, that most people hold that this might not be the actual reflection of what 2027 will be, and this is just a beginning of rearrangement both in Malava, in the Nyanza area, in Mbeere North ahead of 2027, that calls for both camps not to hesitate. to plan their camps ahead of that. The major central player in this whole scheme will remain to be the Gen Z votes, because most of them were not witnessed in this particular by-election. And so walking into the major elections in 2027, other than the divisions of the camps, the major determinant of the presidential election and the major elections in the regional blocks will be the Gen Z votes. Now, another interesting angle to it that most people have been saying is whether or not it was an intentional move to have Rigathi Gachagua go to Mbeere North for his fall. And this is being orchestrated by certain ends of political commentators and political analysts who, now looking at Mbeere North post whatever happened, might deduct it as one move that was done by President Ruto intentionally to have Rigathi fall. So hypothetically, let's explore this plan before we conclude this episode. You see, if it was an intentional move to have Rigathi fall, then where would it better to have Rigathi fall at? Most likely it would be better to have Rigathi's fall in the mountain, because the first time Rigathi was ousted from power position, he was in the power arrangement as the deputy president, and then now he escalated from that position to become the mountain keeper for quite some time, until now this Kindiki infiltration was seen, which other people now have analyzed and are seeing was not genuine because of the outpour of resources that the government did in that area. Now it is seen that this could have been a move to fully put an end to the dominance of Rigiji in this area, and that move was orchestrated by President Ruto so that it falls nowhere else but within the mountain. And while exploring it, residents now feel that Rigathi was hoodwinked after dropping Duncan Mbui as a candidate. They felt like if Rigathi had an initial candidate in Mbeere North, not a Democratic Party candidate, then most likely his might over the mountain region would have been showed in a very easier way. But dividing the 61% voter turnout into halves with the government candidate came as a result of the fact that Rigathi stopped supporting Mbui and went ahead to support the Democratic Party candidate Newton Karish, while the DCP party had a chance with the mountain area. Other people are now giving it the look that perhaps the 2,400 votes which went to Mbui was also an initial plan by the government and the UDA team to divide the influence of Rigathi Gachagua in that area and to neutralize that influence with Duncan Mbui, who was also at this time that the elections was being done, of course, was resilient towards towards creating a new path without associating himself with the DCP party that had rejected to give him the party certificate. So residents from Mbeere North who are commentating in the political scenes online feel that Rigathi Gachagua hoodwinked himself, or rather was hoodwinked, when he chose to support Newton Karish and stop a candidate of his own in the area. But another political angle that the DCP party justified was that DCP was first and foremost a very small party. And looking at it, this was rather a very smart move to neutralize wastage of resources and neutralize use of so much resources in a by-election, yet they still have to support candidates in the major elections. And remember, this particular party had said that the youths who are vying under the DCP party would most likely be given free tickets in 2027 when they decide to vie with that party. So now Mbarire now says that while they were delivering on the actual needs of what the people wanted, the camp of Rigathi Gachagua was delivering promises. This narrows back to the talk that while the DCP camp was campaigning in a campaign that has now been marred or been termed as a campaign that was full of enmity and bruised ego, the government side now says that they were focusing on giving the people of Mbeere North what they actually needed. Whether or not this was a political move to finish Gachagua in the mountain will be clear in 2027, a year from now, after all political level fields have been maintained ahead of that election. It's been a pleasure to recap that here at the People's Mirror. Until the next episode.